Hi guys, welcome to this video. In our last video, we talked about HTML form, and this is the part 2 to the last video. If you haven't watched the previous video, I recommend you go do that, and I'll be placing a link to that video somewhere around this video. Okay, that's been said, I also need to announce that this is the last video on our HTML series, and that simply means that after this video, our next video is going to be talking about CSS as well. So in our next video, we'll be learning how to style the web using CSS, and that's just it. So if you're excited as I am to watch the next video, please subscribe to this channel and ensure to give us a like if you like this video, and if you don't like this video, don't just give us a thumbs down. You could just place a comment in the comment box explaining what you don't like about the video. So this helps us to actually create better content for our next video. So just like, comment, and share. So let's see what we've done so far on our web browser. So I'm going to be opening these up on our web browser, and here we could see we have our full name, and we can write a full name like Augustine. And if you observe, if I should add more characters, it gets to a point whereby it stops typing. So I'm actually pressing the keyboard right now, but I have nothing being typed on the text box. So that is because we added a max length over here. So the max length here is actually set to 12. So whenever we type any character that is up to 12, that simply means that this input field cannot accept a character that is more than 12 characters. So that's the validation we've added here. And for the min length, we can't really see that in action, but when we start talking about JavaScript, we can use the min length to make some sort of custom validation. And our date of birth is actually of a date type, and over here, clicking on this is going to give us a date picker, of which we could easily pick our date of birth over here. So we could just pick this as our date of birth, and it also populates our DOB in the input field. So aside from clicking on the date picker, we can easily set it by using the up and down arrow key on each and every one of them. We'll come over here and we add another one here, and we could just change all this data. We could also change that of the month as well. We'll change out this data. So that just states for the date of birth. And over here for the age, we actually say that the age is the type of a number. And in this case, the age would not accept any letter in this box. So if I should type letters, you could see that they're actually making they're actually not typing into the input, because this is of type number. But when I type something like 1, 2, it goes. And in addition to that, and the input number also gives us this kind of arrows to be able to select to scroll through numbers like from 18 to 19, 20, 21, 22, just things like that. And this is our regular button that is just having the value of register student. So there are still more HTML inputs to talk about, and the next one we'll be talking about is actually the radio button. So I'm going to duplicate this one more time, and over here I'm going to call this gender. And this is of type radio. So I will say this is a radio button, and over here I'm going to write mail. Sorry, I meant mail like this. I'm going to write mail. I'll be giving this a name. So I know we've not really used this attribute before called name, and that is because we never had any use for it. But now, to use the radio button, we need to use the name attribute. So I'm going to add a gender here. I'm going to call this, I'm going to call the name gender, and I'll create another radio button again. I'll leave a space. I'll call this female. And I'll call this female. So I'm not going to put a colon. I'm just going to put an input here. So this is a radio button as well, and I'm going to be giving this a name of gender. So I'm giving this the same name I gave to the male input. I'm also giving to the female input. So the name is the connection between these two input fields. And if we should save this and go back to our web browser, we could see we now have gender and we have these two round buttons over here. So these are actually the radio button. And when I click on female and then I click on male, we could see that the female gets deselected in order for the male to get selected. So we can only select one at a time, just one at a time. So that's how this works. And what's responsible for that is because of I'm giving them same name. So if I'm giving these a new name like A, B, C, for instance, and let's save this. Let's see how this goes. Let's refresh this. Now I can select male and I can also select female. So that's why we actually need to give them the same name. So I'm going to paste this over here. And if you notice as well, we can't really click on male to select this. When we click on male, we click on female, it's actually giving us same value. It's not really selecting the female box over there. So we're going to correct that quickly. So we're going to come over here, we'll cut our gender, we'll place it here, and we're going to make this to be, we're going to give this label. This label would only be for the male, and we're going to create another label. We're going to create another label for the female. I'll be removing my for because I want to add the label in another way. So I'm just going to do this way, and I'll save this. I'll come over here, refresh this. So now you could see when I click on male, it goes. I click on female, male, female, male, female, just like that. So we've actually seen how to add a radio button. So we're going to add another one, which is actually called a checkbox. So we have another input, and I'll say this is a div. This is a div. I have a label here. I have a label. I'm not going to be using the for. And this time around, I'm going to add a little description here, and I would say hobbies. So go hobbies. So over here would be a list of hobbies. And the first one is, let's say, running. And I'm going to put a checkbox here. So this is a checkbox. And I'll be giving this a name as well. I could give this a name, I could decide not to give this a name. So I'm going to be explaining what this name is actually used for. So the name is actually a unique identification for our inputs. So the name is actually used in a situation whereby our back-end language wants to actually interpret what's going on in the front end, the inputs that is coming. So when we have several inputs here, we can have several checkbox inputs, several radio inputs, and several date inputs. But how do we identify which input is actually performing a specific function? We use the name. So if we have a date input, for instance, we could have a date input which is called the start date and another one called the end date. So they are both date inputs, but when the time we name them, we're giving them a kind of a unique identification of which date is for which purpose and which other date is for another purpose. So that's actually the answers of the name attributes over here. So it's not really mandatory for us to add the name attributes in all situations, most especially when we're using some front-end frameworks like Angular. Sometimes we might want to use the name, sometimes we might want to use some kind of custom attributes that has been shipped with a particular JavaScript framework. So that's why I said the name is actually very good, but it's not all that's mandatory for all kind of web application. So, but for now, I'm just going to be using this. So I'll be calling this hobby, and over here, I'm going to create another hobby now. I'll just copy and paste this. I'll call this running. Let's say sitting, and I don't really know any other hobbies. So let's go eating, and maybe this is crying. I don't think anyone has such a hobby called crying, but you got the idea. Now we'll refresh this, and here we go, hobby. We have running, eating, sitting, and crying. So these are our hobbies over here. So you could just select which hobby is actually for you. Now that's actually what we have over there. Great. So after that, we're going to add another HTML input as well. Now this one is actually a unique HTML input. It's not usually being used by so many people, but I'm just going to show you so you get to know about it. So this is actually called color. So I'm going to give a label here. Like always, I'm going to remove the for because I want to do it this way. I'm going to say I'm going to call this eye color. Color, and in this time around I'm going to say input is equal to type of what? Color. So that's all, and I would refresh this and let's see how it is. Now we could see that this is eye color, and when we click on this, it gives us this beautiful color picker for us to pick the color of our eyes. So we could have blue, this kind of blue, or green eyes, and we don't know the kind of eye color this user would have. So the user is just going to pick his eye color. So let's just say the user has this eye color, for instance. All right, so this is the eye color, and it's just a kind of a color picker. So whenever we want to create a color picker, we just use the input type of color. So that's it for the color. And the next one I would like to talk about, this is actually an input type that is very well in use. Like you can't do without it whenever you're making a form. In most situations, you would always use it, and that is called the select. So to make a select, I'm going to put this in a label as well. I'm going to put this in a label, and I will come over here. So I'll say select now, and I need a name for it. And for the name, I'm going to call this hair color. I'm going to call this hair color, and over here I'm going to give it an ID. I don't really need an ID for it, so I'm just going to remove it. Now that I have my select, I'm going to give it a select property. Actually takes in one more tag inside of it. So when we have the select over it, we have one more tag inside of it, and that tag is called option. So this is our option, and our option must take in two stuff, which is one, a value. So we could add a value for our hair color. So the first hair color is black over here. So for after our black, we can write it here again, black. So the text written in between the opening tag and the closing tag would be what would be displayed to the user, while the text written as the value would be what our back-end language would use to interpret this. So this is the actual value, and this is the display value. So I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm going to write black, brown. I'm going to write this here again, brown. And now say red, and over here, red, and here we go, blue, and I'm going to say, okay, so I actually erased something over there. So this is red, and here we go, blue, and over here we go again, blue. So I'm going to save this, and let's see what it looks like. Now we can see that we have our select button over here. So when we click on it, we have this different option, and we can just choose from, but we didn't really add a descriptive text to it. So to do that, I will just come over here, and I will go hair color. So I'm going to save this and refresh this. Now we have our hair color, and we can choose from black to red to blue to any other color that we've actually specified. Now that being said, we have something else again, and that is let's take for instance that we want the student to add their social media handle. So we can actually create a field for them. So we're going to put this in a div again, so it comes down as a new block element. So this time around, we'll say that the social media handle will go this way. First, we create the label. We come over here and we'll go social media. So let's go inputs. And this time around, we're going to use the type of URL for our input. So the type of URL actually displays like a regular text input. You could see that these actually have no visual difference with these inputs. They appear to be the same thing. But one thing you should know is that the URL input on a mobile phone would actually make the keyboard to be customized in a way whereby the user would be able to input the URL quickly. For instance, on the keyboard, you might be seeing a key called .com or a key called .org because of this is a URL input. But if it's a text input, we're just going to have the regular alphanumeric keyboard on a mobile device. So the difference between the URL and the text is mostly felt on a mobile device. So that's it for the URL. And the other thing I would like to talk about here is actually a part whereby the user will be able to upload something like a passport photograph. So now I'm going to create a label again, and I'm going to put this on a new line, label, and I'll raise this. I'll come over to this part, and I would say upload passports. So this one is going to be another input of type file. So this is how it works here, and when we refresh this, we could see what it looks like. Now we could see upload passport, and when we click on it over here, we could see it actually gives us this over here. It just opened up the file Explorer to select a specific file for us to upload. So I could just select this file over here for upload, although this is not an image, but with JavaScript, you would be able to write things like custom validation to validate if this is a picture or if this is a Word document and all that. So that being said, we can come over here again, and we could then go for the last one, and the last one is going to be a bio. So for the bio, we're going to have a label again, and over here I'm going to say bio, and here I'm going to say text area. Now this is our text area, and here we have our name, our ID, our columns, and our rows. So I actually don't need a name and ID for now, so I'm just going to remove those. I am assuming we already know what those are. So I'm going to leave the column and rows so I can actually show you what they are. Now, when we come back over to this place and we refresh, we could see that on our bio we have this big box for us to write whatsoever we want to write. Like, this is my name and I am a male, or whatsoever we want to write. We could just write it over here on our bio. But in a situation, I would like to show you this using the developer tool. Now I open the developer tool using the Ctrl+Shift+I, and I'll select the text area. Now if I should change the columns to be 15, for instance, and I press enter, now you could see that the width of the text area became smaller, and the rows are actually 10. Now you can see we have 1 row, 2 row. I'm going to copy this and paste it several times, and let's see. And I'll remove this last line and this last line over here. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now you can see this last row here is actually the 10th row. So if we should say we'll change this to 5 now, we could see that it became shorter. So that's just actually the function of the rows and column. But ordinarily, I really don't like adding this. I like styling the width and the height of my text area using CSS. So we're going to be learning how to style those when we actually get to CSS. Okay, so this is it, and this is our form, our login form, and our registration form. So right now, this is a dummy form because even if we should fill up all this detail, we can't actually submit this form because we don't actually have any backend service to support this. So this is just what we've learned so far. We can pick a color. We can pick a color over here. And we could say we pick a particular file. Over here, we can write in a URL. Let's say www.google.com. And here we could write a bio or whatsoever we want to write. And by default, a text area is resizable by default. So if that's so small, you can make it big and write whatsoever you want to write in it. So that's just how this works. That's just how this works. And that's all for our HTML session of this tutorial. In the next video, we will be learning CSS, and we are going to be styling all these inputs that we have here, and we're going to be seeing more things that are actually looking beautiful. So that's all for today. Please remember to like, to share, and to subscribe. Have a great day.